All right, so we're diving into something pretty interesting from Reddit today. A thread from our Lawyer Talk that caught my eye. It's titled, "Is a monthly financial goal normal in PI?"
Oh, yeah. That's a thought-provoking one for sure, especially in the world of personal injury law, or PI as it's commonly known, cases where someone's been injured due to someone else's negligence.
Right, and this thread really gives us a look into what lawyers are saying about the kind of pressure and expectations they face at their firms, and honestly, some of it's a little concerning.
Definitely. I mean, the whole idea of setting financial targets that attorneys are expected to hit each month, especially when you consider how unpredictable legal cases can be, it really makes you wonder how that aligns with the lawyer's duty to their clients, putting their best interests first.
Absolutely. So that's what we're going to unpack in this deep dive. Is this normal? Is it ethical? And what does it say about the PI field and how some of these firms operate?
Exactly. We're going to explore the different viewpoints out there and what those perspectives might tell us about the priorities and maybe even some of the challenges within this particular area of law.
Okay, so let's start with the original poster. Boring Resolution 572. Sounds like they're a PI attorney who's really struggling with this whole mandatory monthly financial goal thing.
Yeah, they seem to be feeling pretty inadequate, like they're not measuring up because their cases aren't settling fast enough to meet these targets. You can really sense the frustration in their post.
Yeah, for sure. And it's interesting because then Advice Animal 318 chimes in and they say they exclusively represent plaintiffs in PI cases. So, the injured party. And they've never encountered this in their entire career.
Right, and what's really striking is their emphasis on the client's right to decide when and how to settle their case. I mean, that seems pretty fundamental, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like the client should be in control, not the firm pushing for a certain financial outcome each month.
Totally. But here's where it gets kind of hairy. Boring Resolution 572 then describes some practices that are happening at their firm because of this pressure to meet those monthly goals. And honestly, it's a little alarming.
Okay, so what are they saying?
Well, they mentioned being pressured to aggravate the adjusters to try and get offers that are higher than the client's medical bills. And keep in mind, an adjuster is someone who works for the insurance company.
Right.
But get this, they're not even allowed to tell their client about an offer until it hits that threshold. So basically, the client's being kept in the dark until the firm is happy with the number, which doesn't seem right at all.
No, not at all. I mean, this is where you start to see a real conflict with a lawyer's fiduciary duty, that ethical obligation to always act in the client's best interest.
It seems like the firm's financial goals are taking priority over the client's right to know what's going on and make informed decisions about their own case. Exactly, and it's telling that another lawyer, Advice Animal 318, just responds with, "My goodness, that all makes me uncomfortable, lol." It's almost an understatement when you think about the ethical implications here.
Yeah, that casual really can't hide the concern there. It highlights how far outside the norm these practices seem to be for many PI attorneys.
Then we hear from someone with a lot of experience, Eitz T. Zaddy. They've been in PI law for 25 years, and they say these monthly settlement quotas are pretty unusual.
Interesting. What do they think is more reasonable?
They suggest maybe quarterly targets would make more sense because cases just don't always resolve neatly within a month. It takes time, there are setbacks, sometimes things drag on. It's the law of averages, as they put it.
Right. That makes sense. It acknowledges the reality that litigation and settlements don't always happen on a neat and tidy schedule.
But then New Law Guy 24 jumps in and is like, nope, it's totally normal. They even suggest Boring Resolution 572 should be tracking all sorts of case data, like when demands are sent, follow-up times, deadlines. Sounds super metrics driven.
So we're seeing those different approaches already. One focused on hitting financial targets and another that's more about letting cases unfold naturally.
Yeah, and it's interesting because Boring Resolution 572 pushes back and says they have something like 100 cases. I mean, imagine trying to track all that data for that many cases. It just sounds overwhelming, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
And New Law Guy 24 is basically like, well, my team members manage it with similar caseloads. It's like they're coming from completely different worlds in terms of resources and support.
Yeah, maybe some firms have systems and staff to help manage that kind of volume, while others expect attorneys to handle it all themselves.
Right. Then Boy Scholtol 17 comes in with a strong opinion, saying that any firm that has monthly settlement goals is not respectable or ethical. Pretty bold statement.
Wow, that's a pretty clear condemnation, and it definitely echoes those concerns we heard earlier about clients potentially being pressured into settlements that might not be in their best interests.
And New Law Guy 24 just dismisses it, calls it a KPI, a key performance indicator, and basically says, good luck, bye-bye. Talk about missing the point.
Yeah, they're just talking past each other. At this point, one focused on business metrics, the other on ethical considerations.
Then Popular Lawyer 1169 offers a more nuanced view. They say having a goal isn't weird, but expecting it to be met before cases are actually ready to settle is where things get messed up.
Okay, so a more middle ground approach.
Yeah, they emphasize that good PI work is about managing cases well and letting the legal process play out naturally. They even say cases will often settle themselves when the time is right.
It sounds a lot more client-focused, right? Instead of pushing for settlements just to hit a number.
Absolutely. And this is where Boring Resolution 572 gives us more insight into their specific situation. It sounds like a lot of their cases are messed up because of high attorney turnover at the firm and lots of case transfers.
Oh, so they're constantly playing catch-up.
Right. They feel like they're fixing other people's mistakes instead of being able to actually work their cases and move them toward settlement. Plus, they mention crazy daily quotas being on call 24/7 for client signups, making tons of calls to insurance adjusters, filing demand after demand. It sounds like a real mill environment.
Yeah, it definitely paints a picture of a firm that's churning through cases as fast as possible, maybe at the expense of quality representation.
Then Enyesk chimes in with some insider knowledge. They say it's pretty typical for new PI attorneys to have a ramp-up period of 6 months to a year where lower settlement numbers are expected. Which makes sense, right? It takes time to get up to speed.
Right, everyone needs time to learn the ropes and build their skills.
But that's clearly not happening at Boring Resolution 572's firm. They're expected to hit the ground running and meet these ridiculous goals from day one.
That's a lot of pressure for someone just starting out in their legal career, and it goes back to that idea of a firm that might be prioritizing quantity over quality.
Yeah, and Boring Resolution 572 confirms this, saying they do have cases that could settle, but they're bogged down with all these pre-existing issues from how they were handled before. It's like the firm's attitude is just fix it and settle it, no excuses.
It sounds incredibly stressful, and I can see how it would make it almost impossible to meet those monthly targets when you're constantly dealing with the fallout from someone else's work.
Enyesk agrees. Strinup says, sounds like a mill. They also make a great point about how the high pay these firms often offer can be a trap, especially for newer attorneys who might not realize what they're getting into.
Yeah, it's easy to be lured in by the promise of a big paycheck, but sometimes that comes at the cost of your well-being and your ability to actually practice law ethically and effectively.
And Boring Resolution 572 seems to be realizing that they even say they're considering taking a pay cut to find a work environment that's less toxic and more aligned with their values.
It takes a lot of courage to walk away from a high-paying job, especially when you're early in your career, but it sounds like they're prioritizing their mental health and professional ethics over a big paycheck, which is commendable.
Now, Ghostface Riddler suggests that maybe these monthly goals become more reasonable after a few years of experience, like once you've got 3 or 4 years under your belt. But Boring Resolution 572 points out that their firm mainly hires first-year attorneys and applies the same pressure across the board.
So there's no grace period, no time to learn and grow without this intense pressure to bring in money.
Exactly. And to top it all off, Exciting Badger 509 comes in and just bluntly says that any plaintiff's firm with a monthly settlement goal is scummy, which really echoes how Boring Resolution 572 seems to be feeling about the whole situation.
That's a pretty strong statement, but it speaks to the ethical concerns that many lawyers have with this practice of tying an attorney's worth to how much money they bring in each month, especially in a field like PI, where the focus should be on advocating for your clients, not just hitting financial targets.
And it makes even more sense when you consider Boring Resolution 572's background. They mention having worked in civil legal aid and family law before, which are areas that are much more focused on helping people than on making a profit.
Right, those are fields where you're often dealing with people who are facing some really tough challenges, and the focus is on providing support and advocating for their rights, not on generating revenue.
Exactly. So, to wrap things up, this thread really shows us how divided the PI legal community is on this issue of monthly settlement goals. Some see it as standard practice, while others see it as unethical and harmful to both lawyers and clients.
It's a real clash of values, and it highlights that tension between a firm's need to be profitable and an attorney's duty to always put their client's needs first.
And it's not just an abstract ethical debate either. We're talking about real-world consequences here. For lawyers, it's the stress, the pressure, the feeling of never being good enough. And for clients, it's the risk of being pushed into settlements that might not be in their best interest, all because the firm is focused on meeting its financial goals.
It's a stark reminder that the way a law firm is structured, the values it prioritizes, and the expectations it sets for its attorneys can have a huge impact on the people they represent.
So as we end this deep dive, I want to leave you with this thought. If you or someone you know ever needs legal representation, it's worth thinking about what kind of firm you want to be working with. Do you want a firm that sees you as a person with individual needs and goals, or just a number on a spreadsheet? And what kind of pressure might that firm be putting on its attorneys, and how could that ultimately impact the way your case is handled? It's something to consider because finding the right legal representation can make all the difference.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. It's been a really insightful conversation.
You bet.
We'll see you next time.
Looking forward to it.